Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I've been working a lot with a lot of technology videos the last couple of years, and I thought maybe I should do a break, talk about something a little bit more fun. So today we're going to talk about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I'm going to try to compare what happened back then and what happened now. If you don't know what Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs means in the IT world, I'm going to explain that to you right after this. So some things that you probably don't know about about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is that it's not a children's story or a Grimm's fairy tale. This has to do with the computer industry as it had existed in the 1960s. So Snow White always referred to IBM because they were bigger than the rest of them, and the rest of them, being the Seven Dwarfs, were Burroughs Control Data, General Electric, Honeywell, National Cash Register, or NCR, RCA, and UNIVAC. So you had those seven players that competed with IBM, sort of. I remember seeing some sales figures back, I think it was around 64, 65, it was way before my time in the industry, but at that time, the marketplace for in sales for 1 year would be around $12 billion in the computer industry for selling hardware. And the Seven Dwarfs collectively, this particular year, earned about $2 billion out of that $12 billion. The rest, of course, went to IBM. So you can see that there was a huge disparity between what IBM was making and the rest of them. So, yeah, they weren't really true competitors. And, I remember there was always talk of antitrust lawsuits going against IBM, and IBM would say, well, we've got seven competitors, but they weren't really competitors. They were just seven different companies that were just grabbing crumbs that fell off of the IBM table. In the 70s, that field shrank. RCA was having difficulties financially in this division, and so they were looking to get out from under it. But UNIVAC was interested in some of their patents, and so they wanted access to those, and so they bought them. General Electric's computing division, I don't know if it was financial trouble or just their CEO at the time said, this isn't really a business. This isn't a business that we want to be in. And so they sold it to Honeywell. So now we had, instead of seven, we had five. Well, you can't say Snow White and the Five Dwarfs. That doesn't make any sense. So a new term was monikered up, and I don't remember who coined it, but it was called Bunch. It was basically the first initial of each company: Burroughs, UNIVAC, NCR, Control Data, and Honeywell. And then that became IBM and the Bunch. So, and somewhere along in the late 70s or early 80s, DEC had been making significant inroads into competing with IBM, particularly in the lower end of their business. So they were basically just slaughtering them. I mean, they had a good mini computer, a good operating system, and they were taking over business from them. Now, whether or not IBM cared or not about that, I don't know. But DEC entered the fray, and people started referring to us, although you may not have heard this term too much. It didn't really stick. The Bunch seemed to, but everybody seemed to forget about digital. So it was D-Bunch, as I recall, back then. So, yep, D-Bunch. Some of the advertising that went on back then, I mean, you wouldn't expect IBM would have to advertise since they were making the bulwark of the cash on the table from all of the all of the business that was available. People refer to IBM as Big Blue or Big or just Mr. Big. There was a number of other things people called them, but I'm not going to repeat that here. So some of the ads that IBM would come up with would be, they were just snooze-worthy ads, and they look like this one. new electronics and statistical programming. Ooh, that would get my attention. That'd be a great Super Bowl commercial, don't you think? Yeah, you could just look out and see everybody snoozing, eyes rolling back on their head and just taking a nap. But there was another company called that referred to themselves as the other computer company. Of course, everybody was the other computer company that was in the bunch, but this particular company wanted to differentiate themselves from the pack. They wanted to stand out and above. So they came up with these style of ads that would that used animals, but the animals were put together from computer parts. And then they would direct their message and try to address concerns or particular problems that were in the industry at that particular point in time, particularly going after weaknesses in IBM's product portfolio, both in hardware and in software. So yeah, these were very well done. They were very intelligently crafted, and we're going to talk about how successful they were. So the other computer company, of course, is Honeywell. They wanted something to sort themselves out from the muck, right? Or the ruck of the others behind IBM. Something that after a customer, potential customer, had seen the ad, it'd be something they would remember and hold on to. This campaign started out in 1964 and it ended in 1978, so it ran quite a long time. Although I do remember seeing ads along this vein that were done by Honeywell Bull, and of course that merger took place late in the 80s, I think 87, something like that. There was an advertising firm in Boston called BDDO. They're still around, they're quite famous. Mostly because of this, I think. But Honeywell's director of advertising at the time was Maury Detman. He created an ad concept and worked on additional concepts with BDDO and ad ideas. And I don't know, I would love to have been at the meeting where they decide, oh, hey, I got an idea. Let's use farm animals or just animals out in the wild and craft our ads around that. And they ended up with over 100 different animals that they used in these. Now, of course, this would have been print ads, which are dead today, pretty much. I mean, there's still some that do print ads, but yeah, they don't have the weight that they once did. The animals were sculpted by, I don't know exactly the number. The last number I saw published was 8+ in and around the Boston area that did them. And of course, BDDO was out of Boston as well. So they fashioned these things from basically computer parts, resistors, capacitors, integrated chips, wires, switches, bulbs. I remember even seeing a tube, that the tubing that they used for putting cables under the false floor, because a lot of times in those days the air conditioning systems would have quite a bit of condensation that would leak and run under the floor. So yeah, you ran them in the channels or the tubes in order to prevent them from getting wet. But yeah, I remember seeing them using even pieces of that. Anything was fair game as long as it was related to computer technology. So the animal ads were the most successful advertising campaign in the USA ever for the time frame. Now, that's not looking at, some of the ads that have come since that Apple did and Xerox did, some of the crazy ads that they did. But this one here, the other computer company has something for everyone, was an ad that the Honeywell people put together when they merged with General Electric. And what they were trying to do was head off concerns that customers would have whenever there's a merger between two companies. The fear is, hey, what happens to my hardware? Are you going to support it? Or are you going to drop it in favor of whoever bought who out, right? That's always a concern. So, what they were doing was, hey, don't worry, you're actually going to get more help, because instead of the 3,000 field engineers you were dealing with from before, now you've got 5,000 to come and work on your stuff and keep it running. So, they went out of their way to address the concern ahead of time, and that was the purpose of this ad. Yeah, the 2x2 is that, you get twice as much than you did before. It was a very smart way of dealing with it. But the advertising campaign, so first of all, I'm not an advertising person or a marketing person. I just happen to be have been around the marketing people for quite a part of my life, but for better or worse. So as you've heard me speak before, the advertising campaign for this originated, of course, in Honeywell's Information Systems division. They really wanted to, like I said, differentiate themselves, and so they did three things that I think, this is my opinion. This isn't anything that was been published. There's three things that I remember from these ads, and you can see them yourself. First, they were very colorful, so they got your attention very quickly. It's like, ooh, what is that? And then you look a little further, and you start seeing it's made out of computer parts, and that gets really interesting. Kids will look at that and go, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, look at this," and it looks like a toy, and it's not. But the second thing that they would do, besides having something colorful to draw your eye to it, draw your attention to it, was they would go out and talk to not only their own customers, but they would also talk to the customers that were using competitive hardware. They would find out what their concerns were, what their worries were, what kept them up at night, and then they would fashion the ads to address those concerns. So like this one, is your computer a monster? I mean, is it out of control? Do you feel like you can't keep the thing managed and it's just not doing the job that you had hoped that it would do? And you can't seem to get your arms around it. So they were pretty smart. They knew what the worries were because they went and checked, and then they fashioned these ads up around it. And the third thing they did was they would always, rather than talk about, well, we've got this much hardware, you got this much memory, this much disk, it's going to cost you this much. They didn't do any of that. What they concentrated on was topical areas that would help build their business. So Honeywell was probably one of the first ones to actually try to differentiate themselves into providing solutions for business silos. So that didn't come in the industry until the 80s, when people started going, hey, I need accounting systems specifically designed for that, but then I also want something for my sales organization and my inventory control and my point of sale. So yeah, those things became interesting later. Honeywell was way ahead in that game. They already had feelers out. They already knew about that. So that was the three things that they really did. It was so successful that the other divisions within Honeywell set up and took notice. They went, hey, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe this will work for us. And so they started adopting the same ideas that the Information Systems division had employed and were enjoying successes from. And they too started enjoying successes. And so not only did it help the other parts of the organization, so it was able to adapt itself to other business needs, but the other thing it did was it survived two acquisitions, which would be very rare, because normally you have biases within those organizations that's going to push it or pull it one way or the other. And that didn't happen. They merged, it was, I think, 68 with Computer Products Corporation, or Computer Products CPD. I don't remember if it was division or whatever it was, but they did computer-controlled hardware for managing heating systems and lighting and, air conditioning and all that stuff. But then there was also, Honeywell had an aerospace and a defense arm too, part of their business as well. And then the second acquisition was the acquisition of General Electric's Information Systems or computer division. So, that meant they were bringing on a whole new set of operating systems, a lot more code, a lot different hardware than theirs, and so this model was able to adapt to that. As you can see here, this is one of the ads from that era. So the sculptures themselves were highly prized, and you'll find a lot of them in museums today. They would, I think in some cases, they would have two of those sculptures made, and then one of them they would use to cast a mold, and then they would create pewter facsimiles of the original that they could then give to customers and present to salespeople that had had overperformed their quotas and so forth. So, and they also gave away some of these things to customers. They also had prints made up, and they also did playing cards, and there was all kinds of different things that they had that they could give away at trade shows or as gifts just to get in and talk to a customer. So it did help them open the doors. Plus, the fact that these things were colorful, they had messages that resonated with their customers, that it actually brought a line of business back to them that they otherwise probably wouldn't have gotten on their own. I mean, IBM was a tough nut to crack. This ad here, the one with the Siamese cat, was in relationship to one of the other problems that you had in this early day of mainframes. There were no standards. I mean, if I was writing a COBOL program on a Burroughs machine and then I was going to try to run it on an NCR machine, well, there wasn't going to work, right? You had to migrate the code, the source code, over to their syntax. And the same thing would happen when you got into Fortran. And with IBM, they had on the larger mainframes was PL1. Well, yeah, PL1 didn't exist too much outside of IBM, so you were already screwed. You would have to convert it away to another language. So, yeah, what this ad was talking about was, hey, look, we understand how to move that code. We have utilities to deal with it, so it's no big deal to us. So don't mess around. Just come over and talk to us, and we'll show you how to fix that problem. But I don't think that technology ads, I've looked at a number of the ones recently. Of course, you can't help but not. I mean, they're all glitzy, and they're video, and they go on forever and ever and ever. But most of them have basic common themes: save money, save time, and do things because you're stupid, right? I mean, they try to make you look stupid, and if you don't use their product, it's kind of a FUD thing that they try to do with the ads today. So I think, yeah, it's kind of gone to the dogs and cats. It doesn't have the same flavor or cleverness of these types of ads, where these were highly focused, highly targeted, and they were meant to stick in someone's mind so that when it came time for them to make a decision, maybe they might just remember Honeywell over calling somebody else. And then you had this one. So in the early days, when people were first starting to deploy computer systems, and I was involved with a lot of those, they were coming from ground zero. They didn't really understand computers all that well. They didn't really understand how it could be applied, so they looked to the vendor to kind of help them, right? Kind of direct them along the way. But as they started becoming familiar with it on their own, they knew their business a lot better than some of our people did. Now in banking with Burroughs, we probably knew way more than them because we had done it for so long. But then you get into areas like inventory, or how to do the service bureau management back then, which is the early cloud. Basically, you were renting time off somebody else's machine. So in this case, what this particular ad is talking about is, long ago there was a computer company, and when you wanted a computer, you went to that company and said, hey, excuse me, I don't know anything about this. How do I make this work? But then as they began understanding how things work, they began to apply their knowledge that they had learned from the computers to possibly solving problems in other areas of the business. And so this one was like, hey, we can help you with that. We understand. We have experts that are inside that understand that level of business, that can help not only with your ideas, but maybe help, shape it and move it along so you're a lot more efficient and more successful. That was a great second tier strategy. That's what we would call that, as a second tier. First tier was somebody that was new, had never had a machine before. Second tier was they already knew what they had. They're looking to do more. So yeah, and this whole thing was called Maury's Menagerie because it was a bunch of animals. And it was nothing short of amazing for the time, because, I mean, you saw what IBM was doing. It was like they were pushing a product, but, it's like, oh, here's a solution, but I don't know what your problem is. So I'm a solution looking for a problem, basically. whereas Honeywell reversed it. They knew what the problem was, and they were coming with a solution to try to at least get your attention to maybe come back and talk to them further. So the Maury's Menagerie came from the BDO's newsletter in 1972, which of course referred back to Morris's advertising, the director of advertising for Honeywell. But I think, there's a lot to be learned from some of these old methods. I think a lot of at least in the Linux community, we could learn a lot from this because we don't seem to get this thing about, you can't just go and say, oh, I've got this operating system, it's going to solve your problems. No, that's not how you market. That's not how you bring something into people wanting to use it. The thing that brought Linux into the server side of things was the web. It was already running on it. It already had the code written. It was already up and running. So, yeah, I mean, it was like, hey, you want to do it on Windows, you're going to have to wait. Microsoft wasn't there in the beginning. Yeah, it's things like that where you have to be there and you have to have a solution and you have to talk up the solution. Without that, you got nothing. And they learned that. They knew that. Xerox did the same thing. I don't know whether Xerox learned from what Honeywell had done or whether they went on their own. Now, later, Honeywell did purchase Xerox. So if you're wondering where they went, that's where they went. They went into Honeywell. So anyway, I think it's kind of cool to go back and look at some of the way the pioneers in these fields looked at things. And I think there's a lot that we could learn from them. Trying to go out and just hawk a piece of software or a solution on its own merits, never been successful doing that. You might as well talk to the wall. If you can match it up to a problem that they're having and show them how your particular solution is the best fit for solving that problem, you're going to get their interest. You're going to keep their interest and probably make the sale. You have a good chance for that. So I think there's a lot we can learn from this. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe, and hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.